Why Castro is the most controversial figure in Cuban history. His name evokes strong emotions and opinions worldwide. His influence on the island nation is undeniable, yet his legacy remains a subject of intense debate. Was he a liberator who stood against imperialism and uplifted his people, or was he a tyrant who suppressed freedoms and drove his country into economic ruin? To understand why Castro is the most controversial figure in Cuban history, we must delve into his life, policies, and the profound impact he had on Cuba and the world. Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz was born on August 13, 1926, in Biran, Cuba. His early years were marked by a passion for education and a growing discontent with the existing political order. Castro's radicalization began during his time at the University of Havana, where he studied law and became involved in political activism. In 1953, Castro led an unsuccessful attack on the Moncada Barracks, which marked the beginning of his revolutionary journey. Despite being imprisoned, Castro's resolve only strengthened. Upon his release, he regrouped and organized the 26th of July movement, which aimed to overthrow the dictator Fulgencio Batista. By 1959, Castro's forces successfully toppled Batista's regime, and Castro assumed power, heralding a new era for Cuba. The Cuban Revolution was driven by promises of social justice, land reforms, and an end to corruption. Castro's initial policies focused on redistributing wealth, nationalizing industries, and improving healthcare and education. These reforms garnered him substantial support among the working class and the rural poor. One of Castro's most significant achievements was the dramatic improvement in literacy rates. The literacy campaign of the 1960s mobilized thousands of volunteers to educate the rural population, effectively eradicating illiteracy in the country. Additionally, the establishment of a universal healthcare system provided free medical care to all Cuban citizens, making Cuba's healthcare system one of the most lauded in the developing world. Despite the social gains, Castro's economic policies faced severe challenges. The nationalization of foreign-owned businesses, particularly American enterprises, led to strained relations with the United States. The U.S. responded with economic sanctions and a trade embargo, which severely hampered Cuba's economy. To counteract the embargo, Castro sought alliances with the Soviet Union. This relationship provided Cuba with economic aid and a market for its sugar exports. However, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 plunged Cuba into a severe economic crisis, known as the Special Period. Shortages, power outages, and a lack of basic goods characterized this period, leading to widespread suffering among the Cuban population. Castro's governance was marked by strict control over political dissent and a lack of democratic freedoms. The Cuban government under Castro was known for its intolerance of opposition. Political dissidents were often imprisoned, exiled, or subjected to harassment. The lack of free press and restrictions on freedom of speech contributed to a climate of fear and repression. One of the most controversial aspects of Castro's regime was the treatment of political prisoners. Organizations such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch documented numerous cases of arbitrary detention, unfair trials, and inhumane treatment of prisoners. The Cuban government justified these actions as necessary to protect the revolution and maintain national security. Castro's influence extended far beyond Cuba's shores. He positioned himself as a leader of the global anti-imperialist movement, supporting revolutionary movements in Latin America, Africa, and beyond. Castro's Cuba provided military and logistical support to liberation movements in Angola, Namibia, and Ethiopia, among others. This internationalist approach garnered him admiration from some quarters but also contributed to his controversial image. One of the most notable instances of Cuba's international involvement was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The deployment of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. While the crisis was eventually resolved through diplomatic negotiations, it cemented Castro's reputation as a defiant and unpredictable leader. Fidel Castro's death on November 25, 2016, marked the end of an era, but the debate over his legacy continues. To his supporters, Castro remains a symbol of resistance against imperialism and a champion of social justice. They point to the advancements in healthcare, education, and social equality as testaments to his visionary leadership. Critics, however, highlight the economic hardships, political repression, and human rights abuses that characterized his rule. They argue that Castro's policies stifled economic growth and personal freedoms, leaving Cuba isolated and impoverished. The dichotomy of Fidel Castro's legacy is a reflection of the complex and multifaceted nature of his rule. On one hand, the social advancements achieved under his leadership cannot be denied. The Cuban healthcare system, despite limited resources, continues to deliver impressive outcomes. The education system, with its emphasis on universal access, remains a model for developing nations. On the other hand, the economic struggles and political repression cast a long shadow over these achievements. The exodus of Cuban refugees, seeking better opportunities and freedom abroad, is a testament to the dissatisfaction felt by many under Castro's regime. The tales of hardship and separation experienced by these refugees form an integral part of the Cuban diaspora's narrative. Castro's policies fundamentally transformed Cuban society. The collectivization of agriculture and the nationalization of industries altered the economic landscape. The emphasis on education and healthcare brought about significant social changes. Yet these transformations were accompanied by a rigid control over individual liberties and political expression. The Cuban Revolution also fostered a strong sense of national identity and pride. The narrative of standing up against a powerful adversary and striving for social justice resonated deeply with many Cubans. This sense of identity and pride, however, coexisted with the realities of economic hardship and limited freedom. Fidel Castro's charismatic leadership played a crucial role in shaping his legacy. His ability to inspire and mobilize masses was evident throughout his life. From his early days as a revolutionary to his speeches as the leader of Cuba, Castro's oratory skills and commanding presence left a lasting impact. Castro's charisma was a double-edged sword. It allowed him to galvanize support and push through ambitious reforms. At the same time, it contributed to the cult of personality that surrounded him. The centralization of power in Castro's hands led to a governance style that was both authoritarian and paternalistic. Propaganda played a significant role in shaping the public perception of Castro and his regime. The Cuban government meticulously crafted a narrative that portrayed Castro as a heroic figure leading a noble struggle against oppression. This narrative was disseminated through state-controlled media, education, and cultural institutions. The use of propaganda extended beyond Cuba's borders. Castro's speeches and writings were translated and distributed worldwide, contributing to his image as a global revolutionary icon. This strategic use of propaganda helped garner international support and solidarity, particularly among leftist movements. The controversy surrounding Fidel Castro's legacy is unlikely to dissipate anytime soon. His impact on Cuba and the world is too profound and multifaceted to be neatly categorized. The ongoing debates reflect the deep-seated divisions in how Castro is perceived, both within Cuba and beyond. For many Cubans, the memory of Castro evokes a mix of pride, nostalgia, and resentment. The older generation, who witnessed the revolution and its immediate aftermath, often holds a different perspective compared to the younger generation, who grew up in the post-Soviet era. These generational differences add another layer to the complex legacy of Fidel Castro. Why is Fidel Castro the most controversial figure in Cuban history? The answer lies in the duality of his legacy. Castro's transformative impact on Cuban society, his defiance against imperialism, and his contributions to education and healthcare are undeniable. And the economic struggles, political repression, and human rights abuses that accompanied his rule paint a starkly different picture. The story of Fidel Castro is a story of revolution, resilience, and contradiction. It is a story that continues to evoke strong emotions and divergent opinions. As we reflect on his legacy, it is essential to acknowledge the complexity of his impact and the multifaceted nature of his role in shaping Cuban history. Fidel Castro remains an indelible part of Cuba's narrative, a figure whose influence will be debated and studied for generations to come. Whether viewed as a liberator or a tyrant, his place in history is secured, and the discussions surrounding his legacy will continue to shape our understanding of Cuba and its revolutionary journey. If you enjoyed this epic journey, please subscribe to our channel for more thrilling historical tales. Don't miss out on new videos. Hit the notification bell to stay updated.